Hey everybody, welcome back to the Survival Summit podcast. I am your host, Jesse with the Survival Summit. Today we're going to talk about Grid Down Survival Blueprint, how to prepare for prolonged blackouts and power grid failures. Let me hit you with something real. We're living in the most power-dependent era in human history, and our grid is hanging by a thread in some cases. Just a few weeks ago, the Dominican Republic lost power. Not just a small section, the entire country went dark. Millions were left without electricity, without communications, without running water, or reliable food access. And if you think that can't happen here in the U.S., then you're not paying attention. The grid's failing more often. It's aging, it's overburdened, and increasingly vulnerable to cyber attacks, severe weather, and poor leadership. So this episode, it's not about fear, it's about action. What are you going to do today to make sure your family's ready when the lights go out? And they don't come back on for days, potentially for weeks, maybe even longer. We're going to do a deep dive on real-world preparedness, everything from backup power to communications to mental readiness and community strategy. We're going to walk you through with a step-by-step approach for building your blackout survival plan. Let's go to work. Let's talk about why blackouts are inevitable and what that means for you. So why are the blackouts becoming more common? Let's run the numbers. Since 2000, major U.S. power outages have increased by over 60%. Most of these are caused by severe weather, but not all. In 2021, Texas saw a catastrophic failure during Winter Storm Uri. Dozens froze to death in their homes, not because they weren't strong, but because they weren't prepared. California, you've got regular rolling blackouts due to wildfire threats and grid instability. What about New York, facing overloads and aging infrastructure? Even the Department of Homeland Security is running scenarios on cyber attacks that could take out the grid. They're not sharing these plans to scare you, and in most cases they're not sharing these plans with you at all because they either don't want to scare you or they're just trying to be secretive like the government usually does. They're warning us that failure is possible, even likely. That means the burden of survival, it's now on you and me. Not the state, not FEMA, you. Remember what happened in North Carolina in that area? FEMA was not a help. As a matter of fact, some people said it was more of a hindrance when they even showed up in the first place. Ask yourself, if the grid went down for 3 days or 3 weeks, what exactly is your plan? So what happens exactly when the grid goes down? Let's break down the domino effect. When the grid fails, obviously you lose lighting. You also lose refrigeration, cooking, appliances, AC, heat, and potentially access to gas stations. You're going to lose communications. Cell towers are only battery backed for a short amount of time. Once they go down, there's no calling out, no internet, no text, potentially no news, unless you're using radio. And you're going to lose water if you're on a pump-fed system or city lines that use electric pumping. Toilets won't flush, showers stop, sanitation starts to break down. Even if you have a well at your house, if you don't have backup power, your well is not going to run. You won't be able to do things that you normally do with power. A lot of people sometimes take that for granted. You also lose security. Your alarm systems will fail, electric fences will stop, street lights are going to go out, and if people get desperate, homes can become targets. What's next? You lose food preservation. Your refrigerator maybe lasts 24 to 48 hours, depending on what's in there. Then it just becomes a box of rot. Now multiply that across an entire city. What would that look like? It looks like chaos. People are going to panic. Supplies are going to vanish. And help may not arrive. Law enforcement, they're going to be stretched far too thin. Hospitals that run on backup generators, man, they're going to start doing triage care. They're going to get overrun very quickly. You think you've got time? You really don't. That's why you have to plan now, not later. Because when everything fails, you fall back to your level of training. Not your gear, not your gear list, your training. And a popular topic with us, PACE planning, which is the backbone of real preparedness. Let's get into that system that we use every day at Survival Summit, PACE. For those of you who don't know, PACE stands for Primary, Alternate, Contingency, and Emergency. And it's how you plan for redundancy in everything that you do. It's how you eliminate single points of failure. So we're going to break it down with real-world examples, starting with power. Your power PACE plan could be, doesn't have to be exactly this, but it could be your primary is usually your grid electricity. Your alternate could be a gas or propane generator. You know, you can get one of those smaller Honda EU 2200s, which is a very quiet, and I think a gallon of gas lasts at least 6 to 8 hours depending on the load you're putting on the generator. It's a lot easier in some cases, but you're not going to get the same amount of power than a normal backup generator or, a bigger generator that you're going to have. Your contingency could be solar power. Could be solar power banks with panels like an EcoFlow or a Jackery. You can get systems that will run your entire home for up to a month, but that's very, very, very expensive. Sure, you can get solar generators with solar backup panels, and it'll run quite a few different appliances, but you have to make sure you have enough power. It's likely not going to run your furnace. There's a lot of things that are going to really suck it down. Like if you try to use a coffee maker with a small solar generator, it's not going to last for very long. So you have to plan according to what you actually need in your home. And of course, you have to plan on your budget. Budget's very important. So your emergency, no power at all, you might be down to candles, fire, crank lights, Mylar blankets, hot water bottles, that kind of thing. What about water? What's your PACE plan for water? Primary for most, usually tap water. Your alternate could be 55-gallon drums or just jugs of stored water. Your contingency, you might have a rainwater catchment and gravity-fed systems like, Berkey filters, things like that. Your emergency could be a natural water source with a regular filter, Sawyer Mini, Grail filter, or just simply boiling water and drinking it that way after it's cooled off. That's usually your emergency situation. What about communications? What's the PACE plan for communications? Primary, of course, is going to be, for most everyone, a cell phone. Alternate could be a satellite communicator like a Garmin InReach, or it could be a satellite phone. Your contingency could be a ham radio, could be something like just a Bofang, a cheaper one with a backup battery. Your emergency could be walkie-talkie, could be down to a signal mirror, whistles and flares, could even be written notes, could be a whole variety of things where you're not using any technology whatsoever. The good news is you can build a PACE plan for every need. Food, shelter, security, navigation, medical, anything you can think of, you can make a PACE plan for. This isn't theory. This is all field tested. The military uses PACE planning. SAR teams use it, search and rescue, and you should too. All right, next we're going to talk about how exactly do we build a blackout-ready home? Real systems, real gear. How are we actually going to set that up? How are you going to set up your home to survive without power? You always start with the basics. Everything is always back to basics. Lighting, cooking, water, heat, food, and communication, and obviously security. So as far as lighting, just don't rely on flashlights alone. And if you're going to use flashlights, I love flashlights. I'm kind of a flashlight addict. But I also have headlamps because hands-free is going to be king, especially when you're setting up gear, cooking, or dealing with any type of emergency. You're going to want a headlamp so you have both hands free. And nowadays, you can get a 1,000 lumen or even a 2,000 lumen headlamp for pretty cheap from there's a lot of good companies out there that are making decent headlamps. You can even use solar lanterns, like the Lucy light, I think it's called. It's a lightweight, waterproof, charges during the day with solar. And it's basically a solar lantern that you can use when you need it the most. And some people like the LED motion sensor lights, for your hallway. They're cheap, they take batteries. They're not that bad. They give you plenty of light when you're trying to get through the house. Candles, of course. Now, you want to be careful with candles, obviously, so you don't burn your place down. But when you go with candles, try to go with beeswax or tallow. They burn longer, they burn a little cleaner, and they don't make your house smell like chemicals. What about fire starting? Ferro rods, like the Craftig 5-inch ferro rod, works in wet conditions. Bic lighter, you should have a Bic lighter all over the place. You should have at least 2 in your kit. You should probably have one in your kitchen. Even if you don't smoke, have a Bic lighter. That's going to be your primary source most times. You could have things like the Mini Inferno or Fatwood for emergency tinder if you can't go outside and try to get a lot of tinder. You can have pre-made tinder right in your house. You could even use the old school, cotton balls and Vaseline, although it's pretty messy. What about like a rocket stove or like a flat pack stove? That can work by the stove is a much smaller footprint and you feed the sticks into the stove. It's way more efficient and it's super portable. And you may use that for all kinds of things. Cooking, keeping warm, light. Obviously, I shouldn't have to say this, but don't do it in your house. You're not going to light a fire in your house. That would be really dumb. But I have to say that because somebody might do it and then blame me. Hey, I watched this podcast. He told me to use a rocket stove, and I used it in my bedroom, and my house burned down. What about cooking? You could use butane or propane camp stoves. Coleman's pretty solid. Jetboil for compact use. Make sure you always store the fuel outside the house. Never cook with propane indoors unless you have proper ventilation. If you don't use them, you also want to use cast iron pans. They're much more durable and fire friendly. You also want to make sure you have a manual can opener. Trust me, you don't want to figure this out on day 3 with no power and your regular can opener breaks somehow. I've never had good luck with regular can openers. Somehow they get jammed up. Maybe I'm just terrible with them, but I've had every type of can opener you can imagine, and I'm not really a big fan of them. Water. Obviously, water is going to be huge. You need at least 1 gallon per person per day at a minimum. We try to store at least 7 days per person. That's 28 gallons for a family of 4. That's the minimum. Try to have, if you have room in your basement, try to store, those food grade containers or 55-gallon drums for extra water. And along with filters. If you're not going to use filters, make sure you have enough aqua tabs or scent-free bleach if you're going to store for longer than 6 months. Although if you're going to store a lot of water and you have a lot of filter systems, you don't really need to store the water with bleach because you're going to be filtering it anyway. So when it comes to filtration, you could use like the Berkey, you could use Sawyer Mini, which is more for field use. You could use the Grail GeoPress, which is good for field use and in the house. Really more for single-person use. LifeStraw makes bigger versions, gravity-fed filters. There's a lot of different options out there when it comes to water filters, and they're not too expensive. What about a cotton shemagh or just a bandana? Something to pre-filter dirty water, especially if you have to get water from a source that's outside of your home. You want to make sure you pre-filter it, because if you don't, you're going to make the filters in your water filters are going to dirty up much more quickly. You're going to have to backflush them far more often. And if it's gravity fed, you may need to change those filters way sooner than you normally would if you're using a lot of dirty water. Now in the wintertime, or sometimes not even in the winter, heating and shelter, it's going to be massive. If you don't have a wood stove or a pellet stove, if you do, awesome. That's great. But a lot of people don't have that. Make sure, if you do have a wood stove, make sure it's clean. Make sure you're keeping it up to date. Make sure it's stocked with, you got plenty of wood, and that you're practicing starting it without kindling if you have to. What about a stove? If you have gas, your stove's probably going to work just fine, at least for a while. But do you have propane or kerosene heaters with carbon monoxide detection and proper ventilation? That's obviously going to be very important. As far as sleep systems, maybe you have some blankets in your house that are great and you love them. Maybe they wouldn't be so good in the middle of the winter. Maybe you wouldn't be so warm if your thick, heavy blanket if you took it outside, because it's not really made for that. You could use something like, the Snug Pack SF Bivy. Wool blankets are going to be amazing. Even when wet, they still retain most of their capability to keep you warm. And you want to have thermal base layers, like base layers you would put on like polypropylene. Some people don't like to use polypropylene. But as they say, cotton kills. If you're out in the middle of nowhere and it's freezing and you have your first layer is cotton and you're sweating, that could kill you. You want cotton as a second layer. You want to have either wool as your first layer or something like a synthetic like polypropylene. I prefer 100% polypropylene. A lot of people say it can leach things into your skin, but I personally don't care that much. How much longer am I really going to be on this earth? I'm not really going to worry about polypropylene as far as my base layers. Another big one is we want to block off any cold rooms. You want to hang blankets over doorways. Keep your family in a small, warm core. You want to keep everyone together so that you can use some of that body heat. What about food? Freeze-dried meals with at least a 25-year shelf life, like Mountain House, Nutrient Survival, ReadyWise. MyPatriotSupply.com has a lot of great ratings, and I know some people that really love using them. Good pricing, good calorie-dense foods. Or you just have canned goods, beans, chili, corn, tuna, Spam. Spam's kind of gross, but some people like it. Anything that doesn't require refrigeration. Even MREs. They're not all that good. Some of them I think are awesome, but some people don't like them at all. But they only have a 5-year shelf life. They don't require cooking, so that's great. But after 5 years, I've never really tried to eat an MRE after 5 years. I'm sure you probably could. But if there's bacteria that grows in there and you eat bad food, especially in a survival situation, you're going to have a really, really bad day. Same thing with emergency rations like the SOS or the Datrix. Those are super calorie dense. I keep some in the vehicle, keep some in my bug out bag. I keep the 3,600 calorie the squares. Those last for about the same, about 5 years. But they're really not going to freeze, and they're not going to melt if it's super hot. What about spices? Yeah, spices. Believe it or not, hot sauce, garlic powder, salt. Morale matters. You want to have foods that maybe will lift your spirit a little bit. You don't just want to eat some plain old non-taste rations all the time. That's just going to be depressing at best. So try to have a little bit of variety. Now, communication. Battery-powered or crank-powered radios. Those are going to be huge, especially in a situation where something crazy may be happening in the country. Midland, they make a solid emergency model. There's just so many models out there. You want to do the best research you can on gear that's been field tested and has really amazing reviews. YouTube is a great resource for that kind of thing because just be careful if the guy has a partnership with the brand. Of course, he's not going to say much bad things about it. You want to try to find people on YouTube or any other social media platform that are giving you the real review. If there's something they don't like or something they think maybe could use improvement, they should say it. If everything is 100% positive, they're probably making money on it. Not that there's anything wrong with making money on it when you're selling gear. There's nothing wrong with that. But you got to be honest about it. You don't want to sell something to someone that could potentially save their life, especially if it's not as good of a product as you make it out to be. That's just moral bankruptcy, in my opinion, and I wouldn't want to do that to you guys. And I see it all the time, and it's pretty disgusting. If something is a crappy piece of gear, I'll tell you it's a crappy piece of gear. I'm not going to try to make money off telling you something's good when it's not. That's you don't know what could happen in a case like that. Ham radios. If you don't have a license, you should get one. Not that you'd need a license if there was like a total grid down scenario or an emergency. But if you have a license, you're going to learn a lot about it. Hamradioprep.com, which we have no deals with. We don't make any money if you go there. Hamradioprep.com. You can do courses on there. You can learn all about ham radios, and they can help you with your licensing. But you're going to get access to real-time info during a blackout. Walkie-talkies. Try to keep them in every bug-out bag, every cache location. Pre-printed contact lists. I've talked about this before. Never rely just on your phone. Your phone could die. It could get broken. And nowadays, everyone has their contacts in their cell phone. I'm guilty of this too. I'll remember phone numbers from people from high school days. But it's not like that anymore because everything's now programmed in your cell phone, and most of us probably have a ton of different contacts. And a lot of times our work contacts are mixed with our personal contacts. So we don't typically have those numbers right at the top of our head anymore. So write it down. Write the contact info for at least your family, your close friends, or anyone that might be in your group. Now, sanitation. Do you guys have 5-gallon buckets with a toilet seat lid? What about trash bags, kitty litter, or the heavy-duty disinfectant? You know, you can buy kits that basically come with the poo bags and the chemicals that go in them, just like an RV, and it's a lot easier that way. What about baby wipes? You know, baby wipes, dry shampoo. Hygiene, not only is it going to keep you from getting diseases, but it's also going to keep you sane. You all know what it's like if you're out, let's say you go out on a hike, even if it's a few miles, and it's the middle of summer, and you come back and you're sweaty and gross. All you really want to do is take a shower. You're probably not going to want to just sit down and kind of watch TV if you're feeling all nasty. So in a survival situation, you might not think about it quite the same because obviously you're not going to be sitting down and watching a movie, but you're going to feel better if you're keeping your hygiene up. You're going to feel better if you're clean. It's just another thing that you can control. You want to make sure you're storing gloves, masks, bleach. I'm not talking about stupid COVID masks. I just mean in general. You want to make sure you have supplies. So when you're dealing with any type of medical issues or cleanup, that it's not going to be an issue. You want this set up room by room. Don't store everything in the garage or the attic where it's going to be hard to reach, or you or someone else in your family is stocking all kinds of stuff and you have to go digging through, and you, at some point, you may not even know where half this stuff is. label the bins, create kits. You might have a kit that's labeled blackout kit or cooking kit, first aid kit, water filtration kit. You want to make sure everything is easily accessible and labeled so you're not hunting for it, especially if the grid goes down or if the power is out for days. Maybe you don't want to waste flashlight batteries looking for a few pieces of kit that you really need that could be buried somewhere in your attic. That's going to be a bad day. And of course, you want to run drills. You want to practice as a family or practice as a group as often as possible. What about mental readiness? You've heard us talk about this before. Leadership starts with you. So we're going to talk about the other half of survival, the mental game. When the power goes out for real, some people freak out. That's just the truth. Even the prepared, even we can panic. What separates survivors from victims is the ability to act calmly and decisively under pressure. You've heard me say it before, you won't rise to the occasion, you will fall to the level of your training. So train and train often. Run mock blackouts. Say to your family, hey, lights off at 8 p.m. tonight, no phones, no power. Let's run our plan. See how it feels. See where the stress points are. Fix any holes that you find in the game. Maybe you couldn't find your flashlights because you didn't have them in a good spot. Everyone needs to know where all the gear is, and it has to be, again, easily accessible. You want to talk through everyone's roles. Who's in charge of communication? Who's in charge of starting the generator? Who's handling water? Who's handling food? Who's keeping an eye on the perimeter? Because again, security. Depending on, if power's out for a couple days, you're not going to get overrun at your property unless you're like in New York City. That probably would happen just on a normal Tuesday, never mind a power outage. But let's say you're in a suburban area or even more rural and a month has gone by and the power is out regionally or even further. You want to make sure you have 24/7, 360-degree protection and security. So not just having self-defense items, not just setting up a perimeter, but if everyone's asleep at the same time, that's a problem. You should have someone awake, someone sleeping on different shifts to at least keep an eye on the property to make sure that no one is coming anywhere near your family or your group. Kids can be a part of this depending on their training. Even young kids, they can run a headlamp, they can collect firewood, they can comfort the dog. You want to train under stress also. You want to train in the cold. You want to train when you're tired, when you're hungry, because that's when the real test comes, when you're training like you would actually fight. Like I say all the time, if you're just starting a fire on a perfectly nice sunny day with no wind, you've never tried it in the wind, the rain, and the snow, you don't really know what your skill set is when it comes to starting a fire. Next up, we're going to talk about situational awareness, specifically in blackout conditions. In a blackout, your normal patterns, they're going to break. And that's what makes you vulnerable. So what are you going to do? On night one, go dark. Blacken your windows. Don't advertise that your home is lit or powered, even if you're just running on a generator. And rotate watch if the grid stays down for more than 48 hours. You want to check the exits, secure all the doors, prep defensive items close at hand. And please, if you have access to the internet, don't brag online. I don't mean just during a blackout, but really any time. Don't brag. Don't live stream your entire setup. You want to keep a low profile. The longer the blackout lasts, the more desperate people are going to get. And if you're the guy that all your family and friends that are not part of your group or just people that you're associated with know that you have all these supplies and that you have all this stuff set up, where do you think they're going to come? They're going to come to your house. Now listen, if they're friends of yours, you should probably consider letting them in. But don't let the grace get the best of you. They should be contributing. So if they want your home to be a place they can come when something bad happens, they should also be prepared. They should stock up some of their own gear. They should be involved. The people who are not involved now are just going to suck up your resources later. I'm not talking about kids or elderly or people that might have medical conditions. You want to try to help people if you can. I'm talking about people that have the ability to train, have the ability to stock up, but they don't. And maybe in the back of their mind, they're like, I know Joe's got everything I need, so I don't need to worry about it. That's the type of guy who's taking advantage of you and your family. That's the kind of guy you want to avoid. And when it comes to criminals, everybody knows criminals look for the easy targets. So don't be one of those easy targets. This is where community comes into play. Community is a force multiplier. It's also one of the most overlooked parts of preparedness. Your network. You can be the most skilled prepper on the block. You can be as skilled in everything from firearms to fire starting. You can be Bear Grylls, or you could be a former Green Beret. You can have your gear dialed in, plans on paper, drills every quarter. But what happens when things go sideways for real? You're going to want allies, not just ammo. Preparedness is not supposed to be about isolation. It's resilient community. The lone wolf is a very rare breed, and most people won't make it long term as a lone wolf. You really should have community. So where does that start? It starts with knowing your neighbors. You need to have some levels of intel too. Who can you trust? Who can you really trust? Who might you be able to barter with? And who might be a problem? You need to know these things in advance. You don't need to be paranoid. You just need to be observant. They're going to reveal their priorities in peace way before they act in chaos. Next, you want to make sure you're building a trusted inner circle. 1 or 2 families maximum, depending on, I won't say maximum, but especially in the beginning, you want to make sure that the people that are in your group are trusted. You want to, and don't just, hey, this guy's a doctor and he seems like a great dude. That doesn't mean you should trust him. You need to get to know people, especially new people that you want to bring into your group. You also want skills diversity. Someone strong in medical, someone who's a really good mechanic, someone who's awesome at farming, food preservation, someone who's really good at shooting, zeroing in rifles, that kind of thing. And you want to have aligned values. Trust matters way more than talent. It's super, super important. Next up, you want to make sure you're creating a comms plan. If you're using code words, you want to set check-in times, establish rally points. You want to have backup systems if one person goes offline. And of course, you want to coordinate supplies. Avoid any unnecessary duplication. One family stocks maybe more propane, maybe one's. If your group is set up where you're going to meet up together, if everyone's storing all the same things, or let's say everyone's storing, 50 gallons of gasoline, maybe you should be spreading that out a little. One person's storing gasoline, one storing propane, one part of the family is focusing on food and water filtration. You want to keep it tight. You want to keep it honest. You want to train together. You want to know not just what everyone's capabilities are, but what is everyone bringing to the table for supplies. Ideally, you want to be able to cover everything for everyone in your group individually as well. Shelter, fire, water, food, medical, signaling, land nav, communication, everything. And train together. Go on joint hikes. Do map and compass runs where you're practicing with topo maps, topographical maps. Practice your blackout plan as a team. There's always going to be strength and unity, but only when trust is earned and communication is solid. What about bartering? If you're going to barter, there's going to be a lot of value to that, and especially in a grid-down world. If the blackout stretches into days or weeks, currency is going to mean a lot less than it would if everything was up and running. You're going to want barter items, and you have to use judgment to use them wisely. Some of the things that obviously are going to hold value: batteries, especially AA, AAA, CR123s, lighters, fire starters, any type of fuel, propane canisters, gas with fuel stabilizer, water filtration tabs or just regular filters, and over-the-counter medicine, ibuprofen, allergy pills, anti-diarrhea stuff. Hygiene supplies are going to be huge: toilet paper, feminine hygiene, soap, and some of the good things: coffee, sugar, salt, any type of comfort commodity, although I wouldn't say salt's a comfort commodity. Salt's pretty necessary. And ammo. But when it comes to ammo, only trade with people that you trust with your life. Don't trade ammo with a random group if you don't know anything about them, because that ammo could be used against your group. Now, what about alcohol? Alcohol, cigarettes, used sparingly, of course. Those have high bartering power. The key isn't what you trade, it's when you trade and how you trade. And never, ever let someone know the full extent of your group's stockpile. You never want to barter from weakness either. Don't get emotional. You always have to try to maintain some leverage. And remember, in a long-term crisis, skills also become currency. If you have the ability to fix things, to cook, to purify water, especially defense, or you're a doctor or a nurse, you are going to be super valuable. Now let's talk about a blackout survival checklist. I want to give you a condensed version of your survival checklist. You can download the detailed items, most of the detailed items, on thesurvivalsummit.com. That's thesurvivalsummit.com. But here's kind of a quick version. Power. So a generator with fuel and backup parts. You always want to try to have backup parts for any of your equipment. Solar panels with battery banks, power inverters, charge controllers, power cords, splitters, fuel stabilizers, headlamps, solar lanterns, rechargeable batteries, crank flashlights, candles. Again, beeswax or tallow are best. And when it comes to water, you want to have water filters. Whatever your favorite filter is that you've used and tested and you know works great, whether it's Sawyer or Grail or Berkey, you want water purification tablets as a backup. And if you can have a rain catchment setup, awesome. Food. At least 2 to 4 weeks per person of shelf-stable food, whether that's MREs, freeze-dried meals, canned goods. You can buy food-grade buckets and Mylar bags, and you can get oxygen absorbers, and you can put 5 gallons of rice, 5 gallons of sugar, 5 gallons of salt. You can do this, 5 gallons of pasta. You can make a lot of your own foods that'll last 20 plus years, much cheaper than if you buy them somewhere else, like My Patriot Supply. Although they have a really, really good, amazing tasting food, and all that stuff's done for you. So if you have the money, I would highly recommend a company like that. You also want the manual tools, manual can opener, some type of a grinder, cooking source, camp stove, rocket stove. And communications, you definitely want an emergency radio with a NOAA band, a ham radio, if you have the skills to use one, walkie-talkies, and again, printed contact list. Make sure you have it on paper, preferably right in the rain paper because it's waterproof and you don't have to worry about, the ink smearing off. Medical's huge. You want a trauma kit. You want a trauma kit that has a tourniquet, gauze, chest seals, maybe a decompression needle if you have the skills and know how to use it, and regular first aid, medications, ointments, tools. So we still use, I don't have it handy, but we used to use a company that went out of business, and then we found out about Jace Medical. Jace Medical is pretty amazing. You can get antibiotics. This is for off-grid type of stuff. You can get all kinds of crazy kits from Jace Medical, all kinds of medications from them. And I would definitely try to stock up on some of that stuff because you're not going to be able to get to a doctor or to a pharmacy. And especially if the grid went down for a long period of time, most of those pharmacies are going to get run through by criminals and just people looking for medicine or drugs. And you're not going to be able to get the things you need. So you want to make sure you have an adequate stockpile of medicine, ointments, tools. Again, extra prescriptions. Definitely check out Jace Medical for that. And you want some kind of cold storage backup if you have insulin needs. You want to make sure that you can take care of yourself depending on your medical condition. And security. You want locks that are reinforced. You want to make sure you're doing perimeter checks nightly. You want to have safe zones, rally points, layers of defense. And another big one, sanitation. I think they call them Lugaloo or Luggable something. I think they're called Luggable Loo. They're basically 5-gallon toilet systems, and they come as a kit, and they could really, really save you if you don't have a toilet that you can use. You want to have baby wipes, some bleach, some gloves, heavy-duty trash bags, hand sanitizer, your basic things. And of course, your morale and your mental health. Have a deck of cards, books, games, whatever it is. If you're, hopefully, most of you have some type of faith in God, a Bible or any type of faith material. But a Bible and Jesus are always going to be there for you. You also want to have a journal and a pen. Maybe it's tea, chocolate, even music. You don't need all that stuff overnight. You don't need everything on this list. And the list keeps going, especially in the winter. You got to have like the wool blankets, things like that. We do have a full list on our website. If you go to thesurvivalsummit.com and you can, I think there's a pop-up, or you can scroll all the way to the bottom to sign up for our email list, and it'll give you a gear list. And some people might not know this, but Survival Summit, we don't actually sell gear anymore. We're selling books, we're selling our training films, but we don't sell gear anymore. I think we're going to start creating some of our own branded gear at some point, probably sometime in next year in 2026. But all the gear on the list has been tested. A lot of different instructors have used it over the years, and we know it's good quality gear. I don't think there's links anymore on our gear list. If there is, they're probably Amazon links, but I may have taken the links off since we stopped selling gear. But I actually don't remember. I should probably check that out. But again, you don't need all this stuff overnight, but you need to start. The best time to start, if you haven't already, is today. Right? Well, the best time was yesterday. But the next best time is right now. Pick one category a week and build out that category. Test, train, use all the gear to make sure that you're familiar with it, because you don't want to have to try to do something that you've never done before in a situation where you're stressed or the weather is bad or things are just going completely off the rails. Preparedness, it's a skill set. It's not a shopping list. All right, what if the lights don't come back on for even longer? What happens then? It's not a short-term blackout. Those are hard enough as it is, but they're manageable. Now, a long-term blackout, that could be transformational. We're talking about a grid failure that lasts weeks or even months. Obviously, it's rare, but it's not impossible. Remember, back in 2012, we were missed with a massive solar flare that could have taken down the entire grid. And it didn't miss by a lot. And we got really, really lucky. So it's not impossible. And again, cyber attacks, beyond major solar flares, you got cyber attacks, national scale grid sabotage, or total collapse from some kind of a natural disaster where maybe the grid cascades. Even all these data centers they're putting up. What if they start to stress the grid too much and a major transformer goes down? That could cascade into more than regional areas. That could really lead to something bigger. So at that point, everything's going to shift. It's not about when the power returns. It's about adapting to the new normal. We need to think about it in terms of phases. So phase 1 would be, what's your initial response? 0 to 72 hours, what's your response? And then you're operating off your stored supplies. Your communications might still be up. Your neighbors are probably going to be confused. Maybe they're cooperative. Maybe they're part of your group. Now, what's your job in all this? Your job is to stabilize your household, to establish routines, check on neighbors, especially if they're, close friends of yours or definitely part of your group. Phase 2, that's extended failure. That could be anywhere from 3 days to 2 weeks. Everyone's morale is going to dip. A lot of food's going to spoil. Water's going to become critical. Sanitation will become critical. And people are going to get really irritable. Sanitation's going to break down. Medical access vanishes. This is where things start to really get squirrely. Your job is to keep the morale up. And you have to maintain discipline. Rotate watches. Treat minor injuries way before they can become infections. You have to pay attention to everything when you get into that, a couple weeks into some kind of a grid down scenario. Because a minor injury, a minor cut could become an infection. And if you don't have stored antibiotics, that could cost a life. Phase 3, well, now we're talking about a whole new pattern. This is 2+ weeks, could be a month. At this point, you may have to start bartering. Community roles are going to start to form depending on where you live. Law enforcement may disappear completely because they'll be trying to take care of their families. People are going to start aligning into tribes. So our job is to lead. We have to help create order. And of course, you want to try to avoid conflict. Watch for opportunists, for sure. I said to pause the podcast for a minute because my son was downstairs and he's working out and he had headphones on. And I said, hey, just make sure you keep the headphones on so we don't hear the music on the video. And all of a sudden I hear him singing, like super loud. So I had to remind him. Anyway, all right. So where did I leave off? Watch for opportunists. Your daily rhythm, it's going to change. You're going to have tasks now like fetching and purifying water, which you're going to want to do very, very, very often. You're going to be cooking over a regular flame, not on your stove. You're going to be doing guard rotations. You could be, depending on the time of the year, you're doing gardening. You could be doing small livestock care, whether that's chickens or pigs or whatever you have for animals. Could be equipment maintenance. You're going to be doing a lot of equipment maintenance, especially if you're running generators. These are going to become things that are normal to now your new everyday life. And if you've never trained for any of that or that pace of life, you want to start now. But start slow. It's going to be exhausting at first, especially if you're not used to it. But it's something you have to get used to if you want to survive. And in every long emergency, there's going to be 3 different kinds of people. 1, they're going to have the victims. People that are completely unprepared, completely panicked, and that are dependent on anyone but themselves. 2, predators. These are opportunists. These are dangerous individuals. These are desperate people. And normal people, especially with families that were never a predator in their life, if they see their children starving, they could become predators. Not because they're evil, but because they're not going to be able to stand watching their children starve to death. So they may become a predator to get what you have. 3, there's going to be leaders, people that are calm, skilled, decisive. You want to be a leader. You don't want to be a predator. You don't want to be a victim. You definitely don't want to be a victim. But you don't need to be the boss. It just means you need to be a rock. You need to do things that'll help stabilize the people around you. Even if you're not the team leader for your group, you still want to try to stabilize people around you as much as possible. Whether that's, posting routines, help creating the structure of your group. You want to do evening debriefs. What did we do great today? What did we fail at today? What do we need to do to improve tomorrow to make life a little easier or a little better? And make decisions, but also take input. Your family or your group, they're going to follow a confident and thoughtful leader. And you need to keep things simple and clear. Try not to overcomplicate. Sometimes people overcomplicate things, especially when they're in a stressful environment. If you've never led under pressure, start doing it now. That's why training under pressure is really, really important. You train like you fight. And run small teams in training, volunteer lead drills. Build the skill before the storm. Those of you who have been following us since 2015 know that we rarely do anything with sponsors. Cape Mobile, they're different. It's a new mobile service that we think you're going to love. The other carriers, they profit by tracking and selling your data. Cape is a phone service that refuses to play that game. With premium nationwide coverage and privacy baked in at the core, Cape gives you control. Cape has minimal data collection. They can't misuse what it never asked you for. They don't ask for your name, no social security number, not even an address. You get SIM swap protection. Your number is locked with a private key phrase that only you control. You get enhanced signal protection, stopping attackers from tracking your location or intercepting calls. And you get encrypted voicemail. Messages are encrypted so only you can access them. And private payments. Subscribe without handing over any personal billing details. Cape recently partnered with Proton, leaders in secure email and VPN. And Bloomberg reported that the U.S. Navy trusts Cape to secure communications in Guam. Check the link in the description to see how you can switch to Cape today. Be sure to use the coupon code SurvivalSummit33. And thank you, Cape, for sponsoring this video. All right, I want to talk about gear again, but this time I want to talk about durable goods and tools for long-term use. So that could be hand tools, an axe, a hatchet, a saw, shovels, hose, a wrench, hammer, whatever you got, chainsaw, off-grid cooking, whether it's a Dutch oven, a solar oven, or a grill grate on an open fire. Simple, the most simple of them all. What about manual appliances? Hand crank grinders, egg beaters, a clothes wringer, solar string lights, oil lamps, extra wicks and oil. You definitely want to have extra supplies when it comes to things like oil lamps. And power. Do you have solar panels? Do you have extra fuses? Do you have a controller, an inverter? Some of the kits like EcoFlow, they come with all that stuff in one. All you have to do is plug the solar panels into the actual unit itself, the solar generator, and you're all set. The battery bank is within the same system. It's not like the old days where you have to get all these separate parts and pieces. You can get systems that are pretty simple to operate. And sanitation. You want a composting toilet system of some kind. You want to have ash for deodorizing waste. And then animal care. If you have a lot of animals like chickens, and you want to make sure you have enough feed. You want to make sure you have it all fenced in. And you need to know a little bit about first aid for your livestock, whether it's chickens or pigs or rabbits or goats. And you want garden tools. You want to have trowels. You want to have some type of a seed library, with heirloom seeds. Heirloom seeds are amazing. And of course, you want documentation. You want some kind of printed materials on first aid, herbal medicine, canning, repair diagrams for your equipment, all that kind of stuff. And again, I talked about this in previous live streams or in videos. I have everything. I have a solar power bank backup for pretty much everything. I also use some EcoFlow systems that are a little bit bigger. And I try to keep, I have thousands of survival manuals on a USB thumb drive. Now I have adapters where I can put that in my phone, in an iPad, in a laptop, and I can charge all that through my solar system and still have access to way more than trying to lug around thousands of books. It's just an option, something for you to think about. And medical gear. Maybe you have a suture kit, although you got to have some good skills to get into that kind of thing. Antiseptic splints, oral rehydration tablets and salts, tinctures if you're into that kind of stuff. And don't forget, seeds are going to be your backup food supply. You're not just going to slap seeds in the ground and boom, we have food. You're only going to get that food at certain times of the year, and you have to really know how to garden well. And don't forget books. I talk about having thousands of manuals on USB thumb drives, but I also have a lot of books. I have a lot of books with a lot of information. No one is going to remember everything. It's just not possible. So you want to make sure you can have books that can teach you things or brush up your skills in certain areas. And a journal. Maybe make a journal. It could be a little bit, good for mental therapy. Sometimes we put out a video where people say stupid things like, oh, this is LARPing. I kind of hate that term, but that's not what this is. This is about living deliberately in a world where modern systems could stop at any time. We need to get back and at least have some of the skills that our ancestors did, that the pioneers had. Because if things do go bad and you have no skills, well, it's pretty much over for you. Let's now talk about something that really doesn't get enough attention in the prepping world, and that's morale. Morale, faith, and mental toughness. It doesn't matter how much food you have or how well defended your home is if the people inside are starting to break down mentally. Grid failure, it's not just about gear. It's about not just survival and skills, it's about emotional survival. And for most of us, and hopefully should be for everyone, spiritual grounding. So how are you protecting that morale? Well, again, you have to have a routine. Structure can be calming. Set times where you wake up. Set chore times. Who's doing what? Meal times. And then rest times. Rest is huge. You want to rotate watches when it comes to security. You got to let people sleep. You're no good to anyone if you're running on fumes, especially if everyone on your group is running on fumes. Enjoy, even in a crisis. You want to break out that card game, tell some funny stories, laugh as much as you can. It's about connection. Family bonds matter. Bonds with the people that are closest to you, they matter. Talk to each other. Hug when they need it. Pray together if that's part of your life. And if it's not, it needs to be. This isn't just tactical. It's human. And, I talked about faith, but for those of us who believe, now is when it matters the most. Open that Bible. Ground yourself in purpose. Crisis reveals what was always inside. You'll find the difference between those who endure and those who collapse is rarely going to be gear. It's grit, it's faith, it's love of family, and the will to push forward no matter what. You're not just pushing forward for you. You're pushing forward for your kids and your wife or your husband and anyone else in your group that you care about. Now, let's say the grid is down for months. Maybe it's down for, 2, 3, 4, 5 months. Life is going to look a lot different. You're up with the sun. You're cooking over that flame. You're fetching water. You're replacing and repairing gear. You're gardening. You're definitely standing watch. The world is just going to slow down significantly, and it gets a lot more physical. So you need to make sure that you're keeping up with your cardio, strength training. You don't want your body to start to break down. And you want to work in teams. No one should be alone for very long, not just for safety, but also for sanity. And create job rotations. Even kids can help, whether it's collecting firewood, helping with food prep, tending to the animals, and document everything. Keep a written log of supplies, events, weather, what your needs are, what your barter item supplies look like. You want to keep track of this stuff so you know where you're at with your entire group. And again, make space for rest. At least, every 7 days, take a full day off. Rest, reflect. This rhythm, it might not feel natural at first. We're used to fast food instant answers with, Google and AI and endless screen time. But with time, that slowness is going to become clarity, and you will adapt together. Again, lone wolf is a shitty situation. You don't want to be a lone wolf if you can help it. So if you're sitting here asking, hey, still don't understand why these guys are doing this. Why are we talking about this? Why are we talking about all this preparation when we may never need it? Well, preparedness has never been about, it's just the end of the world. It's about protecting what matters. What matters most? Your family, your freedom, your faith, and your future. That's what Survival Summit is about. We're trying to equip you guys with training, tools, and of course, our books, where we try to get as much knowledge out as we can. And if you haven't picked up some of our new books, Pace Planning, 9 Pillars of Preparedness, Situational Awareness, and our newest book with E.J. Snyder called Die Trying, check it out on thesurvivalsummit.com. Those titles are also available on Amazon. Keep going. Train smart, lead well, and when the lights go out, be the one people are going to look to. Until the next time, stay sharp, stay resilient, and stay dangerous in the best way possible.